Hello and welcome to the Advanced Flag Football Officials Training. In this training, we're going to talk about expectations of head refs, being a great crew leader and crew dynamics, game management, presence and confidence, situational awareness, penalty enforcement, including special enforcements, as well as signals, what those look like and what those can look like when you put your own style on them. As one of the more veteran officials on staff, you're going to be considered a crew chief or a head ref this semester for flag football. The reason for that is you have more experience on the football field. We want you to be a vocal leader when you can, on and off the field. Younger and less experienced officials are going to look at you to set the example of how they should act. So we want you to set a great example of professionalism, hustle, and customer service, basically anything that it is to be a intramural official. You should have the highest rules knowledge on the field. If you don't feel that way right now, that's completely fine. But we trust that you know what you're doing. That's why we've selected you as a head ref. So you should be able to answer the questions that line judges and back judges have for you. And if you can't answer the question, you should know where to find the answer, whether it's in the rule book, talking to a manager, or talking to myself, and either getting the answer and giving it to them, or letting them know where they can get the answer. Most of all, we want you to be confident in yourself. You're an R because we have confidence in you, and so we want you to have confidence in yourself. We want you to feel comfortable helping newer officials with rules application, professionalism, mechanics, things like that. Just because you don't have the title of manager, you may not have the title of manager, doesn't mean that you can't be a leader and you can't be a crew chief on and off the field in between games and things like that. And then again, above all, we want you to have fun. We want you to set the right example for our younger officials, but we want this job to be fun. And so we want you to find that balance of professionalism, coaching, teaching younger officials, and having fun with them. So as a crew leader, a lot of your crew is going to play off of your demeanor. If you get heated or if you get excited for a call, they're going to get excited. But if we have a calm demeanor, just slow and steady, other officials will pick that up. That will be contagious. When new officials, maybe they make a mistake, maybe they made the right call, but players tell them they made a mistake, calming them down, giving them confidence, talking to them, saying, it was a good call for what you saw, or whatever the case was, being able to calm them down, provide feedback on the plays. And then you're also a temperature gauge for the game. So when players are going to get more heated towards the end of the game, scores, different things like that are going to dictate how the players are going to perceive certain things. And so when things get stressed, you kind of need to be that calming force on the field. Make sure you're bringing teams down, calming down officials, and kind of bringing everything back down to a steady normal. I want you to push officials to get better. When they do something really good, praise them. Tell them, great job, great get, really good call, strong whistle, great job there. And then criticize softly. So if there is something that you saw that maybe we threw a flag when we shouldn't have, or we didn't throw a flag when we should have, and we can have a conversation about what we saw and then what we can do to get better. But we want to make sure that we're not doing that in front of participants, where when we're praising someone, we can do that in front of participants. And then again, be the example in all interactions. Even if you think no one's watching, one of your newer officials is going to be watching. So make sure that you're being the quality leader that we want you to be in all situations. When players get heated, make sure that we're not getting heated with them and things like that. So the next several slides are going to be highlights from an article that was in Referee Magazine. The whole article is on Canvas if you'd like to read it. It's not too long, and it's a pretty good article. So it's written by Steve Javie, who is an ESPN analyst. And so whenever they cut away to an official, the analyst during NBA basketball games, he's the one that's kind of breaking down the play and talking about what the officials saw. And then Monty McCutcheon is the VP of referee development. So both of them did a presentation at a national officiating conference. And then this is the article that was also written in conjunction with that. So a lot of this is coming from really experienced NBA officials, but can be used in any sport. And so one of the main things they say is being a crew chief is more than just a title and goes beyond any playing arena. So one of the biggest pitfalls to becoming a crew chief for the first time is thinking that you have to see everything. And of course, when you try to do that, you see nothing. So again, being a crew chief doesn't mean that we're going to call everything on the field. It means that we're going to let our partners work, and we're going to train them and teach them and bring them along so that they can call in their area rather than thinking we have to take over. So being a crew chief means that you can make mistakes. Anytime you make a mistake during a game, it requires true humility to admit your error. We can admit our errors a lot more often between officials. So at half, we can talk about, or after the game, we can talk about things that we missed, things that we would have liked to do better, things that maybe we wanted to get a better look at, and so we would have liked to have a different angle. And then ultimately, we can, once maybe per game, we can tell a team that, yeah, I might have been out of position for that one, or that probably wasn't my best call. I'll work harder. So we can admit mistakes, but especially if we're going to be a leader, we need to be humble in that. And so if we're going to coach and try to teach our younger officials to learn from their mistakes, we also have to admit when we've made them. Again, we need to trust our partners. We talk about it all the time, but the weeks 1 and 2 are going to be a little bit rough, and so we might have to go out of our area to go get elephants that happen. But once we get deeper into the season, we really need to trust that our partners are going to do what they're supposed to be doing, and then talk about misses rather than going and getting misses when they're marginal. You're a facilitator, so you need to be able to facilitate discussion. We're not always going to have a manager that's available at halftime or after the game to talk about stuff, and then they may not have time during halftime. So all these opportunities when there isn't a manager, you can be talking to officials, working with them, talking about certain things. If you had a strong game, talk about other situations that you've had in the past and things like that. Being that leader on the field will calm the newer officials down a little bit, especially when things get heated, and it really solidifies that crew as like we're working together and we're going to make sure that we do the best we can. And then ultimately take care of your partners. Know when they're struggling, right? So when someone's snowballing and they missed a call and then they miss another one because they're still thinking about it, and all that piles up. See when that's happening, be that calming force with them, motivate them to work hard to get better. Phrases like "you got this," focus in, we need you. We can stay away from the get your head out of, you'll be able to gauge who you're working with, but we want to stay positive and make sure that they know that they got this. And then, again, be able to receive feedback from them. So if you're going to be able to call somebody out and say, hey, we need you on that, we need you here, like this is the end of the game, let's go, you need to be able to be motivated the same way from your newer officials. We know you're competent. That's why you're an R. You have the working knowledge, and we have the confidence in you. So as a crew chief, you're going to be looked to when there's difficult situations, when we have 2 penalties, when we have multiple flags on the same penalty, things like that. You're going to be the one that needs to kind of slow the game down, make sure you're getting the correct information from your officials, and then delivering the correct information to the teams, whether we're picking up a flag or we're enforcing it or we're offsetting, whatever we are doing. We need to slow down, communicate thoroughly, and then make sure that ultimately we get the call right. We need to know what our job is. We need to stay in our primary. We need to know what our partners' jobs are. We need to let them be in their primary, and then help them through with motivating and not criticizing. Competency ultimately requires preparation. So we need to be in our rules. We need to be in the rule book. If you want to read or if you want to check out the actual flag football rule book, we have several paper copies. So if you want to read beyond just our rules, we have those things. So doing that is going to help you prepare for each shift. And then also handling our scenarios. So making sure you're staying on top of your quizzes, making sure that you're actually taking the quizzes, you're reading the feedback if you get stuff wrong, always trying to get better ourselves. And then we earn respect. You're not going to get respect automatically because you're a crew chief. We need you to earn their respect by respecting your peers, helping them when you can, praising loudly and criticizing softly. Okay, just because you have the title doesn't mean that your crew should respect you. Obviously, we want respect to be a mutual thing between our entire staff, but respect as a leader and those kind of things comes from earning it, not being given it. There's no magical formula. What works for one official might not work for another, and we're going to have different ways of approaching individuals and approaching the game and approaching how we become a crew chief, and that's what we want. We ultimately want you to be an individual and use some of these guiding principles that you'll hear in this presentation as to help you be the best crew chief and leader that you can be. In order to improve as a crew chief, you need to be willing to help when needed. So again, that's in halftime meetings, pre and post game meetings. You shouldn't wait for a manager to come out and start talking to you at halftime. If you have things that you saw in the first half, go ahead and start talking about those. Ask your officials how they felt about the half. Do those things that will kind of bring that crew together without having to wait for a manager. Again, sometimes we're not going to be able to get there as a manager. We have too much going on. There's 2 or 3 fields that a manager is responsible for, and so your halftime might coincide with another one that they're already having a conversation on. So being that leader during that time, and talking about what we can get better at and what we're doing well. We need to be a good listener, communicator. You can't help your partners or players if we don't hear a problem. So being able to listen, being able to understand what the needs of whoever is talking to us are, and then make those adjustments or accommodations. We need to show respect for the PCAs, right? So if you're always calling outside your area, a younger official or a newer official may not throw a flag because they think you're going to get it, and they think, well, it's borderline. I don't want to put a flag on that, and if it's bad enough that it needs a flag, my R is going to get it. So make sure we're trusting our partners. We're talking through no calls. We're talking through calls and things like that to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all staying in our PCAs and officiating our PCAs. We need to be aware of our surroundings and the situation. So deeper into the season, we need to know team and player tendencies. Maybe there's a team that only throws short crosses. Maybe there's a team that only throws deep balls, or the quarterback runs the ball. Once we start seeing those tendencies, then we can talk about those in pregame and make sure that our crew knows what we should be doing in each one of our positions when something like that happens. And the biggest thing that's going to help you be a good crew chief is gaining your confidence through experience. There's no other way to learn how to lead than to do it. And so you may make mistakes along the way, and that's completely fine. We need you to be confident. Again, I've said it several times. We are confident you can do the job. That's why we're asking you to be a head ref. So we have confidence in you. We know you need to. We want you to have confidence in yourself. And practicing and being in that position is just going to make it easier to lead as we move through the season. Game management is a large part of being a crew chief. So this is anytime that you are the crew chief on a sport, not just in flag football, these principles are important. So officiating is an art based on a science. So at this point, you have a little bit more freedom as an official, and things should be getting less black and white. So when we first start teaching officials what we need from them, it's here's the rule, here's how it's enforced. Now that you have some knowledge about game situation, game timing, all those things, you're going to be able to know when you should be doing certain things, when we should be calling, when we should be coaching. And so the game is going to have a little bit more gray area for you as we move forward because you have the experience on the back end of having been a line judge and a back judge for at least one season. We need to understand advantage, disadvantage, so know whether an advantage is gained and then how much of that advantage. So if there's no advantage gained, maybe we can talk the player out of doing it again in the future. But if there is an advantage gained, we need to call it. If it's a huge advantage, we're going to get it every time. But if it's maybe there's a little bit of an advantage, but ultimately it didn't affect the play that much, or it didn't affect the play at all, we don't have to throw a flag. And again, we can coach. So using your knowledge of the game to know when to coach and when to call is going to be really important, especially as a crew chief. We can pass that down to newer officials as well. And then players are going to respond with consistent communication rather than no communication, other than penalties. So again, it's that coaching, saying, watch your hands, easy on the contact, make sure you're in control of your body. All those phrases are going to help you build that rapport with our players, and it's going to help give the players confidence in you to do your job when we're using discretion. Control is similar to what we've been talking about, but different in ways. So we can't control every situation. We can only control ourselves. So we need to make sure that to be an effective leader, we're communicating, we're making sure that we're controlling our emotions when we're doing that. So if we have an official a player that's going off the rails, we're going to get the captain and asking for help in a calm manner. We're giving our warnings, we're giving out our unsportsmanlikes. When we're doing those things, we're doing it in a way that we're still not adding heat to the fire. We're calming, and we have some control over that. And then effective leaders are aware of the strengths and weaknesses of their crew. We need to learn to be self-aware and honest. And so, again, when we've made mistakes, we can own them. When our partners have made mistakes, they can own them. And then we need to figure out how to deal with our stress so that our stress doesn't spill over into our crew. It's important to have control because we're always going to have conflicts. And in what we do, it's inherent. We are never going to work a game where no one gets upset with anything we do. And so we need to have that calmness, that confidence to deal with the conflict. So your job is to lead. It's to lead your crew and the players. Ultimately, what you say is going to go on the field. And so you need to have that confidence that what you're saying is correct. You're held to a higher standard. It takes two to argue. We always talk about it. And so we need you to control those emotions of wanting to win an argument to just diffuse the argument. And you may be 100% in the right and they may be 100% in the wrong, but that doesn't mean that you need to win an argument. It just means that we need to get through it. We need to diffuse the situation and move on. And then we all know players can be unreasonable. At times they're going to go nuts. They're going to do different things that just are completely irrational. We need to be rational. We need to be reasonable in those situations. And all that is controlling our emotions, controlling the game, the speed, everything. Preventative officiating is going to be a huge part of your game management and your control. So we need to recognize our infractions early. Good players are going to adjust and inexperienced players won't. And so if we're coaching and calling correctly, we shouldn't have players wondering why they're getting flags. If we're trying to coach and they ultimately don't listen to our coaching, then we call. If it's egregious, we call it and we tell them what they did wrong. If they ask, they should be adjusting. And then we're going to take less heat from players if we're continually communicating with them. If we've warned someone, watch the hands on a rush, and the next rush they don't use their hands as much, tell them that's great, keep that up. That constant communication of this is what I need from you, you're doing what I need, or this is what I need from you, and then you're not giving me what I need, so I'm going to throw a flag. Warnings are a great tool to let players know that you're seeing stuff that are infractions, but that maybe you didn't need to call it. And so that's all building that rapport and having that confidence. And then ultimately also we have to have a thick skin. We need to let players vent a little bit sometimes. And as long as it's not outwardly disrespectful or anything like that, we can let someone vent about a call, let them get their emotions out, let them know that we hear them, and then that we're all working hard to make sure that we're getting the calls right, things like that. So we need to have that thick skin, let players vent. If they cross a line, they cross a line, and that's on them. We can give them an unsportsmanlike. We can use our tools to correct behavior. But also if someone is removing themselves from a situation, they're heated, they're complaining, and they're walking away, maybe we just let them walk away. Maybe we talk to them after they've calmed down a little bit and be like, hey, I didn't appreciate the outburst. You can always ask me questions of what I saw, but we can't have that. Then the next time, if they don't adjust their behavior, now we have some ability to throw a flag and justify it by we talked about this, I gave you your warning, you didn't listen to it, now you have a flag. But again, sometimes we're not going to hold our flag. If someone earns an unsportsmanlike the first time without a warning, they earned it. That we don't need to give them a warning. Warnings can be verbal or nonverbal. They can be as simple as just putting a hand up towards the person who's talking and just saying, that's enough. We're done. I've heard you. There's a lot of different phrases that will get the same message across of, I've heard what you're complaining about. I've heard what you're upset about, and we're going to move on. Sometimes it's appropriate to talk to the player calmly and quietly, or use their captain, in between plays, go over to the captain and say, hey, I'm having trouble with, 17. They're really, they're getting close to an unsportsmanlike because of the things they're saying, or whatever you need to do. Use your tools. Talk to the player calmly if you feel like that might work. Talk to the captain calmly if you feel like that might work. And then sometimes it's appropriate to warn publicly, right? And that's that hand up. So that's someone's talking and talking and talking and talking, and you finally just, your hand goes up and you say, we're done. I've heard you. We're going to move on. Whatever you need to say, but it's done loud enough, not to embarrass the person, but just to show everyone that, hey, we're we're done with this kind of behavior. A lot of times that'll happen when you're taking heat from multiple players on multiple sides. We can give that one verbal warning to one person that's crossed the line, and everyone should adjust. And then once we've given that "we're done" warning, everything else needs to be a flag. We can't keep giving the "we're done" warning over and over and over, because then the warning really doesn't mean anything. And then we don't want players to show up our crew, right? So if players are throwing their hands up and kicking dirt and running around talking about how bad they are, or they're yelling all the way across the field, things like that, that's when we want to make sure that we let everyone know that that kind of behavior is not okay. So if you've got, a short slant that goes across the middle and it ends up in the line judge's lap, but with no flag, and they thought there should have been a flag, and they're yelling across the field at the line judge, maybe as an R we can step in and say, hey, whatever their number is, we're done. We don't need to do that. We don't need to talk to them like that. Things like that are going to help the crew. We don't always have to only defend ourselves. We can step in when a player is going after one of our crew members. The longer your leash is, the harder it's going to be to rein in a game. So until you penalize, you're building that rapport, but you can't let them go too far. So you got to find that balance of how far are you going to let players go. What are you going to, what kind of behavior is okay. And I think we all have a pretty good idea of what respectful competition's like versus what's disrespectful. And so letting them go until they've extended the leash all the way, and then we're either warning or we're penalizing at that point. Okay. This doesn't mean we want the longest leash ever. So being able to use your discretion of when you're going to coach, when you're going to call, doesn't mean that because you have a lot of confidence in yourself and it doesn't really bother you that much when a player yells that you're just going to let players get away with anything. You're going to let them say anything because it ultimately doesn't bother you. We need to be fair to our other crew members outside of just the crew that we're working with that night. And so we can't let players get away with stuff that's, as a program, we don't allow, just because we have thick skin and we can take it. Not everyone wants to take that much abuse, and so we need to adjust our leash to fit within the program versus just letting people talk to us or say things about us whenever they want. When we are dealing with conflict management, we want to understand first and then explain. So if a player comes to you, or a player is upset and wants an explanation, or they want to vent, they want to talk about how stupid the call was that we made, whatever the case is, we're going to understand first. We're going to let them speak their mind, and then we're going to explain what we have. So they're going to talk and talk and talk and talk. We're going to wait for them to pause, and then we're going to respond. We're going to let the player know that we hear them. And so, say back to them what they are saying. So if they're complaining about pass interference, you can talk about how you're hearing that they're frustrated about pass interference. It's something that's out of your area, so you weren't able to see it. You can talk to the back judge the next time you're able, figure out what they had. We're never selling anybody out. We're never saying, yeah, that was the wrong call, sorry about that, for somebody else. So we're not going to tell a player that our line judge blew something or our back judge blew something. But we want to make sure that they know that we're heard, and sometimes that's all we need to do. We don't need to explain what we saw. And then sometimes we do need to explain. If they're asking questions of what they did wrong, that's when we're going to explain what they did. If we throw a flag and they don't ask, we don't need to clarify. We don't need to tell them not to do something. That's what the flag was. So we don't need to give an explanation every time we throw a flag. When we do give those explanations, we should be able to do it in 8 to 10 words. And so we throw an illegal contact penalty. You used your hands too much. You used a swim move. You displaced your opponent. We should be able to say it very quickly of what they did wrong and what they need to do differently in the future not to get penalized. And remember, it takes two to argue. So we don't want to engage for too long. We don't want to tell them what they did. They say, no, I didn't. We say, yes, you did. They say, no, I didn't. We go back and forth. They're going to ask us what we had. We're going to tell them, and we're going to move on. And so as a head ref, it's really important to keep that tempo throughout the game of you're picking up your pucks, you're moving them, you're going through your penalty enforcement, and then you're marking the play ready. And then if they want to talk, they have 25 seconds to do it. We can talk as we are moving the puck. So if we have a really long run play, let's say we had flag guarding at the end of it, we need to pick up the pucks, go to the end of the run, we need to go to the spot of the foul and then bring it back. we can be talking to someone as we move. And if we're in between plays and we're moving, we can get a little light jog in that'll bring the team with us. It'll keep the flow of the game going and still gives us the ability to talk to somebody as we're moving. If you are walking off a penalty and someone's asking a question, you can just give them a gesture of like, I'll get to you in a second. There's no need to stop where you're at. Try to answer the question and keep going. Just finish walking off your penalty and then answer the question that you were given. And then lastly, we talk about it all the time, but if they're getting really heated and you're not going to be able to give 100% professional response right away, you can't misquote silence. So if it takes you a second to calm down a little bit before being able to address that player, go ahead and take that time. We don't argue because ultimately it's unproductive. We don't get anywhere. It's not our job to convince players that we're right all the time. It's our job to diffuse the situation. So we don't need to get into a power struggle. We shouldn't have any emotion in the game. We don't care who wins. Of course, when we start taking heat from different players and teams, we're going to get agitated. We're going to get frustrated, but we can't take that out on the team. So we should always be unbiased in who we want to win and as unemotional as possible with the game and the results. And so obviously a team wants to win. They have an emotional connection to winning. We don't. We are just there to facilitate the game, so we need to make sure that we're not getting into that play to win kind of thing of like, you're going to say something, I'm going to one up you, you're going to try to one up me, and ultimately someone's going to have the last say. It's fine if we don't have the last say. We can let stuff go. We can tell them what we had. We can let them complain about it, and we can walk away from it. Okay, so don't get pulled into that argument because when we do, whether we are right or wrong, we lose the argument. We lose the battle. We've now lost the team, and we're going to take a lot more heat the rest of the game because they know they're under our skin. Field presence is all about how you carry yourself. It's the confidence you have. It's how approachable you are. And so we want to be confident and approachable and not cocky and unapproachable. We want to be conscious of how we're standing. Are we standing with our arms crossed? Are we standing with our arms at our side, behind our back? Are we giving the appearance that we're willing to field questions or that we are not? And we want to be able to give the appearance that we want to field questions if they have them. And we need to be professional before, during, and after the game. You never know when eyes are on you as an official, and so you may have a team that you don't even know is on your field warming up, even as you set up the field. So we need to do that in a manner that gives our players confidence in us to do the correct job. Downtime is time to get better. It's not time to play around. It's not time to toss the ball, to screw around at all. The time in between games and our downtime is our time to talk about the previous game, what we can do to improve, because we should always leave a game knowing what we personally can do to improve and what our crew can do to improve for the next game. And then we should be preparing for the next game and talking about this team likes to do this, and I have heard about this team, but I haven't actually worked them. You have 3 people on the field plus a manager sometimes, so you may be able to pick the manager's brain of if they've seen this team, how they play, and things like that. So pregame with your crew, talk about funky plays that you've had this year, last year, that you've heard about, that we've talked about in midseason and pre-playoff meetings in the past. Talk about proper enforcement. Give out scenarios at the very least. If you don't have anything to do in between games, if no one on the field has had the teams before, and you've already talked about your last game, talk about what you can do to improve. Talk about situations that might come up, or you've got multiple fouls or double fouls or things, talk through those things as a crew of how you're going to handle it if it happens. And then when we're talking with players, we need to be calm and assertive, right? That exudes that confidence and that approachability. So we're going to answer questions with our rulebook terminology. We're going to answer questions respectfully. We're going to let them ask the whole question before we start answering. So again, going back to illegal contact, use your arms to displace your opponent. That's why I called illegal contact. Just tell them you can't do that. If they ask how to avoid being flagged again, it says make sure you go around your opponent rather than moving them from your path. Make sure you beat them to a spot and get around. Things like that are going to, if they were ever to pick up a rule book, words that would be in there. At the end of the day, perception is reality. If we look sharp and we look confident, that's how we're going to be perceived. If we look sloppy and we look like we don't have any confidence, that's how we're going to be perceived. If you screw something up, it's better to screw it up and look good doing it, right? And so maybe you're the only one on the field that knows you screwed something up. because you've had that confidence. And again, we need to have that short-term memory where we let it go as soon as possible and we don't have to worry about it anymore. Once we start getting on ourselves about, oh, I missed that, and we get wound up in what we missed, we're going to miss something else. And now we're wound up about 2 things we missed, and then we miss something else, and it's 3, and it keeps going and going and going. So if we do screw something up, we have to have a short-term memory. We got to let it go. We got to move on. Same thing with our crew. We need to push our teammates to forget about the mistake they made, but still learn from it. So we don't want to forget everything. We want to forget that there was a negative mark on the game, and we're not going to do that again in the future. You've all worked enough football to know the situation. We know, on a 4th and long where a team's not punting, they're probably going to throw the ball deep. We know on a, 3rd and short, maybe they're going to try to run it or run a short pass. So we need to know the situation of the game. What kind of play is the team going to try to run? Should they be trying to call timeouts? Are we inside 2 minutes with the team down by 2? We're never going to coach them or ask them if they want a timeout, but we need to be ready for what teams should typically do. So we need to understand the game. We need to understand the mentality of players' intent, and then adjudicate it properly. So 2 well-sized teams with a lot of experience. Maybe we're going to have some contact in the line. Maybe we're going to have some contact on passes and deep balls and things like that. And so with 2 teams that know what they're doing, maybe we call stuff early so that we have a tighter game because we know that those teams are going to be able to adjust. And then maybe we have, right after that game, we have 2 teams that have never played before and don't understand the rules. And so we're going to call the big penalties, but we're going to work a lot more with the teams and try to coach them and teach them in the first couple weeks so that they get an understanding of how they should be playing the game. And so really we won't know what we have until we're on the field, and maybe you recognize a team and maybe you don't, but not recognizing a team doesn't mean that they don't have any experience. We'll be able to pick up who has experience and who doesn't from how they warm up and how they start the game playing. We need to have clock awareness. So if the half's running out in the first half, we need to know if they're going to call a timeout because we don't have any dead balls. We need to know if maybe they're out of timeouts and we're in the second half and they're going to try to clock it by taking the snap and quickly throwing it to the ground. We need to know those things. Maybe we know they're going to try to get out of bounds, and so we're watching that play a little bit more. We get a better angle to see if they get out of bounds before their flag belt's pulled. All those things we need to know what tendencies a team should play like and then officiate. Sometimes we're going to get surprised where you think someone should call a timeout or you think someone should go deep or run a short route or whatever the case is, and they don't. That's always going to happen, but we need to be ready for what typically should happen in a situation. We need to know the temperature of the game. Is it heated? Do the team start out as friends and joking and talking a little bit of smack back and forth, and then is one team winning by 40 and now the other team's really frustrated, and that kind of friendly banter back and forth is now turning a little bit more ugly, and one team is really frustrated that their friends are running up the score or this or that. Whatever the case is, we need to really know where the players are at. Is it a really close physical game? We're probably going to get more heated. Is it week 4 and is playoff contention on the line, or is the first seed on the line, or is it the playoffs and is this the semifinal game? All those things are going to they're going to be factors of how the game is played in that temperature of the game. So score, game situation, what type of game it is. Is it a fraternity or sorority rivalry? Is it a rematch of the championship last year? Whatever the case is, that's going to dictate how players react to certain situations. We need to know why a player is complaining. Do they have a legitimate point? Is it something that we can actually take and put into effect? Are they getting hit on the line and are we missing it? Those kind of things we need to listen, understand what they're asking for. Sometimes they're going to be completely baseless and we're just going to have to tell them that we understand what they're saying and we're going to do our best. And other times they're going to have a point and we're going to need to look inside a little bit and make sure that we are doing what they're asking us to do. So all aspects of the game should be part of our decision making, but that doesn't mean that we swallow our whistles. So just because a team's up by 50 or a team's hasn't played well the entire game doesn't mean that we swallow our whistle and we don't throw flags when we need to. It means we use our discretion of when to coach and when to call, depending on how the game is and the intent of the player. Are we trying to stop the clock so we're encroaching as a defense, or why are we committing an infraction? And then our discretion comes into play with how much effect did it have on the game. So we're going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about penalty enforcement. So in order to properly enforce a penalty, we need to know the 4 W's. Who? So was it offense or defensive? Was it kicking or receiving? Who was the foul on? What? What type of foul was it? Was it illegal contact? Was it pass interference? Was it flag guarding? Was it illegal shift, illegal motion? We need to know what type of foul it was, and we need to know timing. Was it during the loose ball? Was it during the run? Was it after a change of possession, before a change of possession? That's going to affect how we adjudicate the foul. And then where? Are we going to use a basic spot? So any penalty by the defense. Are we going to use a spot enforcement with the all but one on an offensive foul? We need to know what the spot is. All of those things are going to come into play when we are announcing and enforcing our penalty. So at the beginning of the season, you're going to need to ask these questions. So when your line judge, back judge comes to you with the flag, you want to know these 4 things: who, what, when, where. By the end of the season, your calling official should come in to tell you, here's what I got. I got an offensive illegal contact behind the line of scrimmage, so we're going to use that as our enforcement spot. It's going to be 10 yards from there. We're going to replay whatever down. So they should be talking to you by the end of the season and telling you exactly what they had and the result, but at the beginning you're going to need to coach them to get there. A large part of our penalty enforcement is knowing the type of play. A loose ball play is everything from the time of the snap until the ball is caught when there is a forward pass or punt. The basic spot of enforcement on a loose ball play is going to be the previous spot. The only exception is roughing the passer. So anytime there's a defensive foul on a loose ball play, the previous spot is the basic spot. That's where we're enforcing the penalty from. Anytime we don't have a pass or we have the part of the play after the catch, those are our running plays. The basic spot of enforcement on a run play is the end of the run. The all but one principle only comes into play when there's an offensive foul. All defensive fouls are enforced from the basic spot. All but one offensive foul is enforced from the basic spot. So we assume that we're going to give the advantage to the offense for the yards gained without committing a foul. The only foul where a team would benefit from being penalized by the basic spot is one that's committed behind, like a foul that's committed behind the basic spot. So therefore, all fouls but that are penalized at the basic spot. So if we have an offensive foul behind the basic spot, we are using that spot as our enforcement spot. So if we have a run, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have flag guarding. So we have a 10-yard run, we have flag guarding, and then the player runs for another 5 yards before they're deflagged. We're not going to give them those last 5 yards because they were illegally gained. We have a foul. The end of the run would be the basic spot. The foul's behind the basic spot, so we're going to move to the basic spot, and then we are going to enforce the foul. Hypothetically, if we had a quarterback scrambling, we had illegal contact on the offense behind the line of scrimmage, and then the quarterback was sacked even farther behind, we're going to use the end of the run in that situation because the spot of the foul is ahead of the end of the run. And so we're always looking at where's the basic spot. If the basic spot is beyond where the foul happened, we're going from the spot of the foul. If the foul is beyond where the basic spot is, we're going from the basic spot. If we think, screw the offense, we're going to take the offense back as far as we can, we will get this right most of the time. The dirty hand principle only applies to the defense when there's a turnover. So the defense, if the defense has committed a penalty, no matter what it is, prior to a turnover, we assume that foul directly resulted in the turnover. If the offense accepts the foul, the down is replayed and the offense maintains possession. So if we have a foul before a change of possession, the offense will retain possession. If we have a defensive foul after a change of possession, we are going to use the basic spot, which is going to be the end of the run. So we're never going to take a ball away from the defense if they've committed a foul after. So let's say there's a pass, it's intercepted, and then there's flag guarding on the defense. We're gonna assess a spot foul where they flag guarded. We're not going to let the offense accept that penalty because the change of possession happened. The defense is going to retain possession when the offense accepts the penalty. We're not going to replay that down. Special enforcement comes into play when we're taking half the distance to the goal rather than all the yards. So let's say we are on the 7-yard line going in. There's a defensive illegal contact on a play that does not result in a touchdown or gaining any yards. We cannot give a 10-yard penalty from the 7, so we're going to walk all the way into the goal line. We're going to figure out that we're 7 yards off. We're going to walk 3.5 steps back out and place the ball because that is going to be our half the distance to the goal. We can't give a 5 or a 10. We can't give a 10-yard penalty inside the 20. We'll always go half the distance on a 10-yard penalty inside the 20. Same thing, we'll always go half the distance on a 5-yard inside the 10. This is also very important to know when we have a live ball, dead ball. So we may have a situation where we have a live ball foul and a dead ball foul, and we need to know our order of occurrence. We're going to walk the first one off, so usually the live ball penalty off, and then we will walk, we'll set the pucks, and then we will walk the dead ball off. So if we are in a half the distance to the goal, maybe the offense had a 10-yard penalty from the 7-yard line, which brings them to the 3.5, and then a 10-yard penalty brings them to the 17, and then we have another 10-yard penalty on the defense during the dead ball that we would go back and walk half the distance from the 17. So we need to know our order of occurrence when we are enforcing live ball, dead ball, especially inside the 20. When we have multiple fouls, that means we have one team has multiple fouls. So we have illegal contact, illegal shift, and maybe offensive pass interference, all on the offense. We're going to pick the harshest penalty. We're going to tell the defense they want to decline the other two and then enforce the harshest one. And then a double foul is when we have at least one foul on each team. That's when we're going to offset. So if we have 2 offensive fouls and 1 defensive foul during a live ball play, everything offsets. It's not a math equation for 1 and 1 offset, and whoever has more penalties left after those penalty yards are enforced. It's not the case. So one team could have 5 flags, one team could have 1 flag. They all offset if they're all live ball. Dead ball penalties do offset 1 for 1. So if we have one team with 2 dead ball penalties and another one with 1, we're going to enforce the 1 leftover dead ball penalty. So live ball penalties, we don't do our math equation to figure out if there's a penalty left, but for dead ball ones we do. So if we have A has, so we have 2 10-yard penalties, 1 on each team, and then those offset. But if we have 2 on A and 1 on B, we will enforce the 1 left on A. I said it earlier, but officiating is an art based on a science. So our signals, you have those signals and you will have them in your rules packet. You should know what they are by now. Those signals are what you should be using and you need to be using to communicate with your partners and the players in the field. But how you communicate those messages and how you deliver that is up to you stylistically. So we don't need you to be rigid. We don't need you to be a robot. We don't need everyone's mechanics to look or signals to look the exact same. We want to use your own style, put your own flair on it, but keep the signal as close to what it is as possible so that people know what you're doing. So some examples of that is on the far left is what the rule book says a touchdown should look like. Then we have several other officials with a little bit of variation. The first one is Ed Hockley. You can see his thumbs are kind of curled in, his arms are out a little bit. And then in the other picture, in the just right of center, you have 2 officials signaling touchdown, and both of them are a little bit different. Official 97 on the right side of the photo has his elbows bent a little bit more than the official on the left side of the photo. And then even a little bit different on the far right, we have our thumbs out rather than our thumbs tucked like Ed Hockley. And so you can use your own style to make sure that you're communicating in your own way. Same thing, we're signaling first down. These are, the rule book version of what first down should look like versus the way that a couple other officials choose to do it. As long as the mechanic is known, you can deliver it the way that you want to. It should be crisp and firm, and it should look clean, but you can put your little flair to it. Again, I've said it several times. You have been selected to be a head ref and a crew chief because we trust you to do the job. We're confident that you're able to do it, and we want you to have that same confidence in yourself. Ask questions when you have them. So just because you're a crew chief doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers. There may be some newer officials. There may be some managers who haven't worked football as long as you that will have some extra knowledge that you can ask them. You can always come ask me questions. You can always ask Adam. But make sure that you are asking the questions that you have. If at the end of a night, you enforced a penalty, but you don't know if you did it 100% right, type up your play, send it to me. Ask me if you did it right. We can talk about those kind of things. Stop by the office to talk about stuff if you'd like. And then keep working to get better and develop your game knowledge, get your situational knowledge, your leadership. If we're not continually getting better ourselves as officials, how are we supposed to expect our newer officials to get better as well? The amazing challenge of officiating is that we always continually get to work to get better. If you do have any questions left over from this presentation, please email me. Let me know if you have a question. Stop by the office, anything like that. I love talking flag football, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions.